Chapter 528, Deon. Silence. What else would exist after the sight that had just been force-fed to the people who had just watched such a horror take place? Adonis, Luciel, Brutus, and Belle. They all stared very frighteningly at the divine beast fallen deity Deon, who had easily destroyed their enemies for them. There was, however, one question on their mind after seeing this. Are we next? As if to answer their question, Deon cast its gaze on the humans before it. It had no eyes, but it could perfectly perceive everything around it, probably even better than those who had perfect sight. None of the humans concerned it in the slightest. There was only one that had its full attention at the moment. Alicia White, the one who summoned it. Growling. Deon growled, taking a step forward as it began to approach the Grand Tamer. It had no real mind of its own, now nothing but a creature of pure instinct, so there was no real intelligence or calculated motives behind its actions. The only reason it marched forward was due to an instinctive directive. Kill the tamer. Deon was incapable of rational thought, but its instincts told it that if the tamer lived, then there was a chance that it would be captured and held captive by a power it could never hope to resist. No one desired to be subservient to another, especially an entity weaker than them. As such, Deon marched forward with obvious animosity oozing from it as it growled. Its prey was unmoving, so it didn't bother exerting any real power. It seemed the prey understood her fate. She was going to die by its hand, and just like the fallen lizards that had perished moments before, her fate was sealed. The only problem were the sacks of meat who stood in front of her, supposedly trying their hardest to protect her from its grasp. There were 4 of them in total, none of them posing any real threat to it. As a result, it didn't really exert itself and kept marching forward. Then, it reached their presence. Whap! A single slap from Deon caused the blonde one to fly away, instantly knocked unconscious by the light sleight of the beast's hand. The next 2 were dealt in similar fashion, this time Deon raising both hands to push them away in swift motion. Just like before, they were sent flying like cannons, despite the creature not putting any real strength in its attack. To the being, they were nothing but mild hindrances that could easily be shifted aside for its goal. All it desired was the tamer's life. The last one that stood before it was a blonde girl, petite and cute, and she looked incredibly frightened just standing before it. Something about this girl seemed different. Deon could sense something inside her, like a mark that had been placed by a high entity similar to itself. No. This one was different. Either way, by process of instinct, Deon didn't hit the girl. Instead, it carried her by the head gently, of course, and placed her behind him so she wouldn't get in the way of its task. She was shivering throughout, probably scared that the beast would crush her head like what he did to the dragons. Well, it didn't. The girl collapsed on the ground, probably passed out, once Deon took its attention away from her, now staring only at its prey. Growling. It growled in a low tone, its hulking stature standing majestically before the one who would soon perish at its hand. I knew this would happen. The tamer whispered, not that Deon could understand whatever she was uttering. It just wanted to kill her. At the very least, with this. Only I have to die. Deon raised its hand, ready to crush her head and have her perish in the most convenient way possible. No one needs to be cursed. The enemies will be defeated. And I'll finally be reunited with Ray and Snow, wherever they are. The smile on her face perplexed Deon for a moment. It didn't have a mind to properly process emotions such as this, but it still stunned him for a moment. The others whom it killed depicted fear and terror, yet this one was showing a completely different emotion. How odd it was. The death of a summoner severs the tether that binds the summon to the location they appear in. Once I die. Alicia looked at her fallen comrades and smiled. They will be safe. Deon would return to the place he emerged from, and even if it would be for a brief moment there would be peace. That was her final gift to humanity, the sacrifice she was willing to pay for a world she despised. Do it. Kill me. Deon didn't need her permission to execute her. He would have done so anyway, and that was evidenced by how its hand moved towards her. Then. Squelch. Another obstacle interfered with Deon's actions, launching their body to protect Alicia. Just in time to save her from being crushed. The blood that sprayed out belonged to this new obstacle who jumped right in front of her. He was a teenage boy, muscular for a human. His back faced Deon, so his face was staring at the tamer whom he just saved with his sacrificial act. I guess. I was able to do something right in the end. The boy whispered, soon coughing out blood from his tired lips. A massive, bloody hole had been created on his torso, with Deon's hand sticking right out of it. Needless to say, the human was a walking corpse at that point. Be Billy. Alicia whispered, her eyes widened as she watched one of her allies, one who was supposed to still be unconscious, save her from her expected end. Why you? No. Why did you? You shouldn't have. Her whispers were cracked, and tears flowed from her eyes as she watched blood ooze from his body. I am sorry. I went ahead and imposed again, didn't I? He whispered, a pained smile on his face as he stared at the girl he saved. The truth was that Billy's was awoken by Alicia's voice. He barely heard what she was saying, but when he opened his eyes, his blurry vision caught the monstrosity known as Deon standing in front of her. At that moment, he only thought of one thing. Alicia. I have to save Alicia. Whether this was rooted in his obsession or not was of no consequence to Billy. In that decisive moment, he simply desired to protect the girl he cared about. Hence, he pushed his aching body to its limits and sent himself hurtling right in front of her, causing him to get impaled by the beast in her place. He muttered, his tired eyes looking at the girl. His sight was blurry, so he could hardly make out her features. Was she crying for him? Was she sad? Was she relieved? He couldn't really tell. But somewhere within him, he was glad that he was able to help to be of some kind of use to her, instead of causing her trouble. My body moved on its own. I guess it's because I... Sploosh. Billy's body instantly exploded into an eruption of blood and flesh as Deon used his second hand to swipe him away. The pressure alone was enough to cause his entire flesh to burst. His words remained unfinished, and the contents of his heart remained unheard. The only thing left of Billy was the rain of entrails that followed his death. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Well, you all wanted it. So I hope you're happy. I'll miss Billy, though. Chapter 529, March of Death. Death. It's such a frightening thing. It fuels its victims with desperation as they attempt to swim against the inevitable tide of tragedy that rushes against them. This unstoppable march. It never ends. Scary, is it not? Enough to turn knees weak, and body limp. Well, an embodiment of this very concept now stared down at a teenager who was no more than 16 right after taking the life of her comrade. The smell of blood and gore filled the air, creating an acrid odor that would cause any to crinkle their nose and leak out a tear or two. This overwhelming sensation, and the bleak atmosphere caused by the shadow cast by the creature of chaos, finally began to register in the broken mind of Alicia White. It was at this moment that she fully understood the terror of death. Her response. A loud scream, akin to the cry of a powerless cur, filled the air, as tears fell down her eyes. Who was she crying for? Her fallen friends? Billy? Herself? Perhaps all of the above. Either way, there was only so much strain that a human mind could take. After that single cry, Alicia could no longer bear the overbearing weight that constantly tasked her brain and body. As such, she passed out right there and there. As her lids closed shut, her kneeling body began to descend to the ground. To anyone watching, it would have been a swift fall to the cold earth, but to the beast that observed the slump, he witnessed it with much time to spare. Once again, it thrust its hand towards Alicia's falling body, planning on wrapping its palm on her face and crushing it in one try. That would be the end of everything. Whoosh! In swift motion, much faster than before, it lunged its hand towards Alicia. At this point, everyone was unconscious. No one would be present to stop this execution, not that they would be able to do anything but serve as witnesses even if they were awake. The inevitable march of death had come. And Alicia was chosen as its new prey. Crunch. The sound of cracking bones, or breaking scales, echoed in the air. It was loud, but also gradual and subtle. Like it happened over time, all encapsulated in a mere instant. Hey! The voice of a young man followed the sound of the breaking scales and cracking bones. He was currently holding onto the girl who had fallen, her unconscious body resting on his broad torso, with her head finding comfort in the warm embrace of his unoccupied hand. His dark cloak fluttered, and the black mask that he donned reflected the sunset. With one hand, he held onto the slumbering girl, and with another, he tightly grabbed the wrist of the beast in front of him. Back off! His deep, dark tone burst forth, and his crimson eyes flashed brightly once he made this powerful declaration. For a moment, there was tense silence, rightfully so, too. No one had ever been able to stop Deon since its arrival in this world. If they did, they would easily pay the price with their lives. However, not only was this dark-coated man in the mask fast enough to react to its swift movement, he was strong enough to stop its attack. It caused the divine beast to pause for a moment, feeling its silvery blue scales crack under the incredible strength of the man of darkness. What the hell are why? Wham! Before the masked man could say anything more, Deon moved its other hand at full speed, sending it flying towards the intruder. The result was devastating. Boom! The masked man was sent flying, his body flung across the area as if he was nothing but a ragdoll who could hardly react to or resist the overpowering current of force that Deon unleashed. Deon failed to calculate one thing, though. Grrrrrr. The prey that it desired to eliminate had been flung away with the man that held her. The divine beast was fast enough to see what had happened. The man surely let go of his other hand and tried to block the incoming assault as fast as he could, but Deon was much faster, so it ended up sending him flying deep into the woods. Deon knew the man wasn't dead, though. The sensation it felt once impact was made was different from the usual kind. Usually, those who were hit by Deon's full speed would turn into paste before its hand even touched them, but there was no such sensation here. Deon definitely felt the impact. Grrrrrrrr. That meant the man was still alive and most likely its prey as well. It couldn't have that. Whoosh! A bright ray of light flashed from within the forest, destroying everything in its path as it approached the divine beast. Recognizing it as a deadly assault, Deon quickly moved out of the way, but not without the blast scraping a part of its scales. Goarha! It yelped, grabbing its hand to feel its scales and a part of its flesh shaved off by the brilliant white light. This was the first time since its arrival that it had felt pain. And, the architect of that fear, was walking towards him. On the ruined path paved by the brilliant white light. The man had Dagon's prey in his arms, cradling her like one would a baby. He was also walking slowly towards it. Deon felt challenged. Its primitive instinct didn't understand most things, but there were certain emotions that even wild beasts felt. Pain. Fear. Intimidation. And a desire for vengeance. Deon turned towards the approaching man, also beginning his own slow march towards the much smaller being that kept advancing forward. Both man and beast took steps forward, until they closed the distance between them and were right in front of each other. Hua! Deon leaked out misty breaths as it stared down at the masked man. The masked man raised his head to look upon Dagon's frightening self. Both stood there in silence for a moment, perhaps waiting for the other to make their first move. Deon didn't hesitate in the slightest. Whoosh! It sent its two muscled hands charging towards the man in swift motion. A brilliant golden barrier instantly appeared to stop it, but the divine beast easily broke past it the same way it did with the summoning circle that tried to bind him. Wah! The sound of the human leaked out, but Deon paid no mind to him. He simply moved too fast for the sound to make any real sense. In a fraction of a moment, it was going to reach for his head and crush it, just like what it did to the Dragon Lord. FZZT. A slight buzzing sound echoed, almost like a glitch, and the human vanished from his position. He appeared a few meters away from Deon, still carrying the unconscious girl in his arms. Grrrrrr. In a flash, moving its legs in quick motion, Deon easily closed the distance between itself and the human, once again seeing it as a pesky bug that wouldn't just stay in one place and die. With nowhere left to run, the human could do nothing but die. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I mean, we all expected Sir Relix to show up and save the day. It's that kind of story. Or is it? Hee hee. Chapter 530, Awake. Ugh. Ray felt a mild headache as he woke up from the realm of unconsciousness. The headache soon vanished, however, same with the last vestiges of pain that coursed through his body. It seemed all his passive skills were doing their work. Ray. The loud, relieved voice of someone familiar burst out as he felt the weight of someone fall on him. It took a few seconds, but after Ray finally acclimated to everything around him, he was able to recognize the young lady whom he currently had in his embrace. Esm. He muttered, his lips moving a little sluggishly. The moment Esm heard this, she left his embrace and looked him straight in the face. Her two hands were still holding him, but they trembled a little as she stared at him. Her moist eyes, and the relief that permeated her face told Ray that she must have been incredibly worried about him. He understood that well. Thanks for looking after me, Esm. Ray muttered, slowly rising to his feet as he held his head while closing his eyes. Memories of the last thing that happened to him flooded his mind at that moment. He remembered the intense pain he felt right as he began losing consciousness, as well as the system's message to him moments before everything went dark. I remember. Ray whispered, his face slowly darkening as he began making a complicated expression. His eyes widened as soon as his mind processed everything, the implications of what occurred to him as quickly as it could. What happened, Ray? Why did you suddenly? They're in danger. All my friends are in danger. Ray yelled out loud, turning to Esm with a panicked reaction. AAHH. Status window. He said hurriedly. Name Ray Skylar. Race human. Class anomaly. Level 70. Life force, 73. Monolevel, 120. Combat ability, 103. Stat points, 75. Skills. Skills. Alignment neutral good. You are an irregularity to the world. Achieving the unbelievable, shaking the balance of reality. You seek to overturn what is and isn't. Will you succeed? Or will your failure be miserable? Damn it. It was just as he feared. I really lost half of my levels. Ray clenched his fist as he felt a wave of frustration shroud him. Rather unfortunately for him, he didn't even have the time to process what just happened. Why your levels? Why? How? I don't under. How long was I unconscious for? Ray interrupted Esm, not having enough time to properly address her confusion. Thankfully, despite being completely disoriented by Ray's bombardment of new information, Esm didn't hesitate to answer his question. I wasn't really paying attention to the time, because I was worried about you, but I'd say about an hour or so. It hasn't been very long. An hour? That's too long. I could be too late. What if I'm too late? Ray began to mumble to himself, looking at his status window again. He violently itched his head, as if slowly growing insane. His widened eyes reflected the deep conflict and fear that ravaged his body. For my duplicate to have died, it means there's some kind of threat in the capital, where I transported them to. A lot could have happened within an hour. What if? Ray. If your friends are in danger, you should be on your way now. Esm's voice suddenly woke Ray from his indecisive bubble. His eyes flashed in shock as he heard those words from the half-elf. The decisive smile she had on her face, the nod of encouragement that she gave him, and the glistening sparks within her blue eyes. All of those things snapped him out of the flurry of confusion that would have swallowed him whole. AAHH. Thank you, Esm. Ray said with a slightly worried, but more resolute expression on his face. You're right. Should I come with? I could help out. No. No, you stay here. Ray raised his hand to stop Esm, his voice reverberating in the air as panic spread from his tone. I have no idea what we're dealing with here, so it's best you remain here. Sorry. I understand. Upon seeing Esm's smile, Ray smiled back. His heart was pounding, and his body was trembling, but he put everything under perfect control. First. In a mere instant, his Relix attire appeared on his body, with the mask covering his face. I have no idea what happened in the capital, or what's going on at the moment. The safest option is for me to use this persona. Ray realized that he would probably have to go all out in the upcoming conflict, so he had to be ready. Second. Ray activated all of the buff skills at his disposal, making sure they all functioned at maximum power right before he arrived. He didn't want to be caught off guard, after all. Better safe than sorry. I could be overreacting, but I can't afford to let my guard down at this point. Once he was done activating all his buffs, all three of his numbers jumped incredibly high. Life force, 60,000. Monolevel, 90,000. Combat ability, 70,000. This should be more than enough for any enemy I could possibly hope to face. Ray thought to himself. If he hadn't been so badly affected by the death of his clone, the numbers would have been much higher, but he didn't have the time to mull over the little details like this. Alright. Let's do this. Closing his eyes, he activated his spatial magic skill, instantly allowing himself to be transported to the last known location of his clone. However, ZZTTZZ. Something interfered with the spatial magic, and while he was indeed warped away from the Grand Calamity class dungeon, he found himself in a completely different location. Ray was thousands of feet in the air, feeling the winds brush past his face as he fell to the capital right beneath him. What the hell? His eyes widened as he saw the city in smoldered flames. A portion of it was completely destroyed, and other sides had been destroyed by massive debris or the spread of fire. Thankfully, it didn't seem like the damage would extend any further, and there also wasn't anyone close to the site of destruction. Despite the horror of this sight, Ray found himself more distracted by the wave of dense energy that covered a portion of the capital, as well as areas in its outskirts. Is this what affected my teleportation? That was the most likely answer. He narrowed his eyes as he tried to pinpoint the source, which was when he witnessed the gory sight of Billy's death. The way the monstrous beast, whatever it was, easily destroyed Billy with the sleight of its hand. Ray let it all burn into his mind. He saw Adonis and the rest of his classmates scattered all around. Eric was nowhere in sight, but the current situation was so overwhelming that Ray thought he would be around somewhere. Luciel and Brutus were also present. They're all unconscious. Except. His eyes widened as he laid eyes on Alicia, watching as the beast raised its hand to strike her. No. ZZTZZ. No way. KKZZZTTZ. Ray pushed past the layers of energy and focused his energy, more than he had ever done before. In that instant, space shifted, and he found himself instantly appearing right where he desired, holding Alicia in his arms as he stopped the beast from completing its task. Ha! Ha! His thoughts echoed in relief as he glared at the monstrous creature in front of him. Hey! With a deep tone, and the powerful aura that he exuded, Ray furrowed his brows and gave a deep frown. Back off. Will now be activated. Good luck. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Well. Now you have your answer. Let's hope this all goes well for our dear MC. Chapter 531, Divine Battle. What the hell? As Ray stared at the beast in front of him, he felt a massive surge of fear press upon him. Even when he activated, which allowed his previously unfocused mind to become much sharper than usual, he still felt vestiges of fear rush up to him. How strong is this thing? Ray found himself asking, his thoughts as precise as possible. Right now, he was the strongest he had ever been. His stats had reached 6 digits, and he could feel himself overflowing with so much power. Yet, for some reason, he still felt inadequate, dwarfed by the creature that stood before him, ready to cut him into pieces. It's fast. In swift motion, Ray used to switch his position from where the scaly monster stood. But SZZTZZ. He was met with a buzzing interference, followed by a forceful activation of his skill, which allowed him to switch positions with the furthest zone available. Just about 5 meters away from the enemy. Again? It's affecting the activation of my skill that I can't go beyond 5 meters. Ray felt himself growing ever so desperate, clenching his teeth as he glared at the creature in front of him. How is this happening? What is going on? From Ray's observation in the short while since he first encountered the beast, he had observed a few things. I can't actively use any skill below SS tier. The energy around is too saturated for the function to be properly activated. Of course, buffs were an exception since they affected his own body. However, if it was a skill that required some form of external manifestation, they would be rendered invalid before their complete activation. I only have 9 divine tier skills, and even those don't seem to be very effective against this thing. For one, his suffered heavily from the presence of the beast. His, while effective against the monster, was something it could evade. I didn't even bother charging it up, since that would take more time, yet it was able to avoid the hit. How fast is it? Once again, Ray had to switch positions again, else the monster would catch up to him again and probably deal heavy damage on him. Speaking of damage, my body still slightly aches from that strike it gave me earlier. Ray found his thoughts trailing as it stared at the monstrosity that relentlessly chased him. It's undoubtedly stronger and faster than I am. Even with being active. Ray already tried to use, but just as he suspected it didn't work on the thing. After thinking hard about it, with what little time he had to actually think, he could only arrive at one conclusion. This is a divine beast, isn't it? Using allowed Ray's senses to spread through the areas that surrounded him. He had long noticed the 3 corpses of the dragons lying on the ground, as well as the unconscious bodies of his classmates. It was thanks to this that he was able to tell that they were all alive, though some were barely clinging to life. If I don't act quickly, things could end up escalating beyond control. As such, Ray decided on the best approach he could think of, considering the current circumstances. All right. Let's do this. With a single thought, he shifted Alicia's position from his hand to the floor behind him, then, strengthening both of his hands, he pushed his body forward and charged towards the creature that also rushed towards him. Doesn't work against it? It must have some kind of ability that allows it to bypass defenses. Or maybe it was just interfering with the skill's effects again, same as with. That meant Ray's only defensive skill was useless in this situation. Evasion was the only way he could avoid damage, and even that had its limits. Every use of the skill drains my mana considerably. If I keep this up, I'll start losing more mana than I recover. That was the problem with the use of divine tier skills. Is the best way I can really see myself damaging it, but it's not the only option. A sudden burst of wind rushed from Ray's position as the entire area around him crackled with power. With the power of, he had a more versatile approach in dealing with the opponent. Also, with, he didn't need to chant any spell or wait for activation. Whatever magic he used would not only be stronger than normal, but their effects would be instant. Boom! Ray's almighty wind gale forced the divine beast high into the air, propelling him up like a rocket ascending at light speed. Whoosh! The creature's ascent caused everything around it to tremble, but Ray stood his ground as he watched the whole thing happen. He also surrounded his allies with the golden lights of his. With his gaze resting on the floating creature who was still fighting against the invisible forces of wind, like the mindless savage that it was, Ray stretched both hands into the air, allowing golden flashes of lightning to dance around them. Rumble. Everything vibrated for miles, as an instant burst of golden lightning descended from the sky, right above the divine beast. It fell, clashing with the creature within a heartbeat, no, much faster than that. Boom! The beam of golden lightning struck the ground, easily creating a massive crater that spanned hundreds of meters from its point of impact. The entire forest was ruined by the shock waves, debris, and plumes of smoke that scattered everywhere. The last of the trees were blown apart or burned away, leaving a barren land in sight. TTZZTZ. Flashes of golden lightning, remnants of the attack, still filled the trembling air, as Ray lowered his hands and heaved a steamy sigh. Now. For everyone. He turned to his classmates, a gleam of determination in his eyes. I know that probably isn't enough to finish the job. I'll have to act quickly and transport everyone away from here as far as I can. Now that the creature was far away from Ray, he found that he could use a lot better, though not to its full capacity yet. I see. So the closer it is to me, the more my powers get disrupted? Ray thought to himself. He didn't have time to dwell on analytics, though. There was no telling when the monster would rise out of the rubble, so time was of the essence. The royal estate still has that barrier surrounding it. And last I checked, the influence of that incorporeal dome of saturated energy didn't reach that point. His thoughts trailed as he narrowed his gaze. He had already seen and memorized the layout of the city from his position in the sky, and once he activated his skill, he would be able to detect everything around him in great detail. Sending them there is pushing the limits of what I can do right now, but I should be able to achieve it. Ray poured out a vast amount of mana, focusing it on those he desired to save: Alicia, Adonis, Luciel, Brutus, Belle, and Justin. He still didn't sense Eric, but didn't let him worry about it. As for Snow, he already figured she was dead. Why else would Alicia try to use her? He also saw Billy die, so that meant everyone else was accounted for. Whoosh. In a flash, even by Ray's standards, the divine beast suddenly appeared before his eyes. At that moment, time seemed to slow down, and Ray's body could barely move. The only one who seemed to be moving perfectly was the beast itself. And its maw was wide open, ready to devour. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. This is, hopefully, going to be a very engaging fight. I really hope you enjoy the battle that is to come. We're still in the prelude. Chapter 532, Divine Battle. For the first time in forever, Ray felt the fear of death. It was so raw and vivid, as he watched the divine beast close in on him with its mighty jaws and overwhelming presence. Then, whoosh. In one swift translocation of space, he was able to shift a few meters backwards, completely avoiding the fatal strike from the mindless beast. Ha! Ha! Ray's widened eyes, moist from the fear, gazed upon the divine beast as he breathed heavily. None of his classmates were in sight, which meant their transportation was successful. Luciel and Brutus were also not present. Good. That's good. Beads of sweat appeared on Ray's face, and his throat slowly began to itch. He swallowed the saliva that had formed inside as he kept his gaze on the terrifying monster in front of him. This thing. It's too dangerous. The more he observed it, the more Ray could see Ader's point about challenging a divine beast. Not only did it have better stats, but most of Ray's skills wouldn't even do anything to the thing. Fighting it head-on is impossible. It's far stronger and faster. The reason Ray could keep up somewhat was due to the spatial manipulation and awareness that offered him. It was almost like precognition. Adding that to his experience fighting monsters, his battle prowess, and intelligence compared to the mindless creature, he was able to somehow hold his ground. That wasn't enough, though. The only way I can win is to somehow use my number of skills, and even with them. Ray clenched his teeth as he tried his best to breathe normally. Had never been under as much strain as it was right now. Come to think of it, I've not seen it use any skill. Or maybe it has passive skills that I haven't noticed. If I can use the same skills, then I can stand a chance here. Before Ray could check out his skill list, however, he noticed something. Where is it looking? The divine beast completely removed its attention from Ray and turned in a particular direction. He already knew, just from a single glance, the location of significance that existed there. The capital? No. The royal estate. With his eyes popping out of his eyes, Ray remembered what he witnessed prior, the beast targeting Alicia before he came to save her. Is it targeting her because she summoned him? Could it be? Ray had read quite a bit about summoning magic and taming, and in it were recorded behavior of summoned creatures. If a creature was summoned through a taming skill, its first instinct would be to attack the tamer, though this depended heavily on the malicious nature of the summon. That was because a tamer could potentially bring the creature into subservience and force it into becoming a loyal subordinate. This was why magic barriers usually came along with familiar summoning. I mean, Ader would have also done the same to me if it wasn't for that barrier. Ray would have wondered why Alicia allowed such a creature out of its cage, or even summoned it at all, if he didn't see the dragon corpses or the destruction within the city. Chances were, it was a desperate attempt to save everyone. This is all my fault. Before Ray could think any further, however, he noticed the divine beast pressing itself on the ground. Its weight alone caused the area to tremble, and everything around it began to leak out cracks. No, you do. Boom. The beast took off before Ray could even complete its thoughts, ascending high into the sky as it charged towards its intended destination. Divine Light Whip. Ray swiftly summoned a long string of golden light, one end wrapped around his hand, while the other already swirling around the body of the escaping beast. You think I'll let you leave? His thoughts roared as he planted his heel on the ground and pulled with all of his strength. He was sure now. The beast's target was Alicia. Taking her to the royal estate made it change focus to that location. It's currently distracted, which means I'll be able to. Much to Ray's surprise, the intense rope of light that was supposed to tightly constrain the enemy began to melt off. Yet, like butter on a hot surface, the golden rope loosened and softened, all in an instant, causing the divine beast to freely proceed with its launch, even kicking away at the air so it could resume its ascent. Ray was so glad it couldn't fly, but its sheer speed alone made it impossible to catch up at this rate. Unless. His eyes shone brilliantly as he utilized his, swiftly changing his location with another place in the air. Thankfully, since he was a distance away from the monstrosity, his skill worked flawlessly, and in no time at all, he was right above the city. He didn't have time to rejoice, or even breathe, however, considering how the divine beast was currently charging towards him like an unstoppable meteor. Ray swiftly pointed both hands ahead and allowed the pure white energy to coalesce into a pure beam of unstoppable light. The result. Boom. The blast of light showered on the divine beast, sending it back down to where it came from. That was close. Ray, once again, could not rest. The moment he brushed the sweat off his brow, he hurtled himself downward, preparing another divine ray in one hand as he let it charge. Whoosh. As he charged downward, he noticed the beast rush past him in the form of a blur. He would have missed it completely if he hadn't focused all his senses on the creature in an attempt to better read its moves. No, you don't. Ray grabbed the divine beast's tail in a hurry, using all his strength to pull and spin in the air. You're not. After spinning for a second or two, nearly creating a hurricane that would blow apart the city beneath him, he flung the beast high into the air. Then, he pointed his open palm towards it. Getting anywhere near her. Boom! The massive roar of rays parted the air, and destroyed everything in its path as it rushed towards the helplessly flying monster. As expected, it made impact. Boom! A shock wave of power burst through the area for miles, at the very least, causing everything to tremble under the pressure of such a powerful attack. Ha! Ray could feel the drain of mana on him, with beads of sweat even forming on his face and his parched throat seeking a source of refreshment. As he hovered above the capital, watching as the figure he struck descended on the barren ground that he had caused from his lightning magic attack from before, he narrowed his gaze and strengthened his sight. What now? He wondered, looking at the falling creature while also opening his skill tab. In both instances, he was met with shock. For one, under his skills within, he found the most unexpected result. Nil. And no skills. As his eyes were still recoiling from the bone. Chilling revelation before him, he heard a powerful cry that was equally as horrifying. The roar emerged from the barren lands, and the one who sent it out was none other than the standing divine beast. Ready for yet another round of battle. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Deon is too broken at this point. I like that you're all probably wondering how in the world Ray is supposed to win. Chapter 533, Divine Battle. Deon's roar shook the heavens and terrified the earth. Its cry emerged from the very depths of its beastly lungs, and its body shook violently as it let everything out. Saliva danced out of its gaping mouth as this echo burst forth, and the surrounding rubble, even the ground beneath his feet, scattered apart and were crushed, due to the pressure alone. In mere seconds, Deon stood at the center of a massive crater of its own making, one spanning hundreds of meters. Then, it cast its attention to the being that stood high in the sky. For a while now, Deon had been distracted, held back by two major things that caused its movements to appear sluggish and lack any precision. One was its instinctive drive to kill the tamer. That, more than anything, was its drive. Even now, as its body boiled in violent rage towards the obstacle before it, the demise of the tamer was the major desire its primitive mind had. As for its second distraction, that had to do with the mark that it sensed within the opponent. It was similar to what it sensed from the blonde girl earlier, but this felt a lot stronger. At the very least, they were both placed by the same entity. Grrrrrrrrrrrrr. The very fact that it sensed this warding mark made it hesitate in slight, but important ways. It was distracting, to say the least. Due to these factors, Deon had not been operating at full strength. But now. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr to shed, losing all of the blue parts to transform into an entirely silver entity. The soul horn on its bald head ascended a few more inches high, the spikes behind it grew larger, and its entire muscled form began to grow much bigger and denser. From 3 meters, it became 5 meters tall. It also stood upright, releasing itself from the hunching gait it once had. At this point, all the damaged silvery blue scales had been shed, revealing only pure silver to shroud its massive form. Right at that point, Deon evolved. Hua. As it let out this deep breath, it noticed the obstacle was preparing yet another blast aimed at it. The last ones hurt Deon a lot, even going as far as shaving off its life force, so it became averse to the sensation. Sure, its scales were tougher now, but its survival instincts told it to evade regardless. Then, boom! The brilliant lights of judgment descended. Greah! Dagon charged forward, its limbs clawing their way on the ground as it began to race ahead. It was able to escape the brilliant ray of light, albeit barely, and began closing in on the obstacle. Vwuyum. The ray followed behind it, attempting to close the distance and burn through its scaly flesh with its overwhelming power. But Dagon was fast, much faster than the light of destruction. In mere moments, it returned to its site of summon, easily lifting itself into the air with a single leap. Boom! The ground shattered as it ascended high into the sky, diving straight towards the one who was sending the light his way. As Dagon got closer, its instincts quickly kicked in. There was a second one. The human obstacle sent his second hand towards Dagon, sending the coalesced beam of light charging at point-blank range. If it had been the divine beast of the past, it would have gotten hit and found himself sprawling on the ground once again, but Dagon was no longer the same as it was before. It had become much stronger, both in body and in mind. Before, it saw the human as a mere obstacle, a distraction from its main goal, so it never really gave it everything. Plus, the marking kept warding it away. However, Dagon no longer cared about any of those things. It had changed its assessment of Ray, especially after that previous blast that sent it flying so far away. Right now, it was going to ignore the obvious warning sign that existed within the boy and aim for his life anyway. Yes. Right now, Dagon saw Ray as a threat. And for a beast like itself, there was only one action that could be taken when a threat was identified. Eliminating it. Whoosh. Dagon dodged the blast at point-blank range, quickly reaching out for Ray's hand and ripping off that very moment. Gaga! It heard the human scream, but that was nothing. Dagon grabbed Ray by the head and easily crushed its black mask, hoping to completely destroy his skull as well. However, Ray sent a powerful wave of wind magic flying towards the beast, one that would have blown it away in the past. And it worked. Somewhat. Dagon felt the impact and was stunned, flying away a few inches, before grabbing onto Ray's second hand and using it as a tether to propel itself towards prey. Ray's second hand was torn apart in the process, and Dagon was able to close the distance in a single moment. Then, it felt a shift in the world around it. Dagon recognized what was happening at that moment. Whatever Ray was about to do, it would involve him teleporting away to create some distance between them. That was another annoying trick that the human had, one that this divine beast could no longer tolerate. And so, like a jet at full speed, Dagon kicked the air behind him and rushed towards Ray right as the zones were about to shift. Needless to say, the human's efforts ended in failure. Wham! Dagon grabbed Ray's bloody face right before he could succeed, causing the entire zone change to be aborted. There was a reason why Ray never used the skill directly on Dagon. He couldn't. Dagon had nigh immunity to skills and magic, so none of those worked directly on it. The closer it got to the source of the power, the more those effects would be affected. And, if it made physical contact with that source, any power activated would be aborted. No one in the world knew this, but this was a manifestation of Dagon's null art and ancient magic that became nothing more than an instinctive part of itself. Ray, or anything he could muster at this point, did not stand a chance. Dagon flung Ray's body towards the dome-like barrier that stood at the highest point of the city. That was where its prey was. With his body helplessly flung towards that direction, the divine beast dived downward, raising both of its hands in the air as it sent its knees crashing on Ray's chest. Go-ark! Blood spurted out of his lips, but that was none of Dagon's concerns. The boulder-like fists, clasped together in destructive harmony, fell upon the boy's face. Boom! The shock wave that resounded in the air spread for miles, and the resulting impact caused Ray to fall faster than ever, easily creating a hole in the magic barrier that protected the whole estate. As Ray fell, Deon followed, something blue-like glowing in its throat. Boom! Ray's descent caused a massive crater at the point of his descent, and while he struggled to get back up despite his severe injuries, Deon crashed right on his stomach, causing him to cough out even more blood mixed in with saliva. On this side of destruction, Ray was on the ground fallen, and absolutely beaten, and the beast stood triumphantly atop its body. There was only one thing left for Deon to do. Eliminate. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Some readers previously complained that Ray was too overpowered, and that he'd never have a challenge. I remember laughing back then.